So I'm going to go right back and ask, where were you born?
Oh, blimey. Okay, I was actually born in Germany.
Were you?
Yeah, I was born in Munster in Westfalen. My father was in the army, so I'm an army brat, basically.
Really?
My mother was German, so she came from Munster. I met during the war.
Yeah.
And after the war, they decided to get married and then moved back to Lincoln. So my father was from Lincoln initially.
Right, okay.
So he was stationed out in Munster as part of the Royal Engineers. So engineering is in our blood, it's in our DNA, I think, to a certain extent.
So when did he come back to Lincoln then?
I came back when I was 2 years old, so 1959.
Wow.
So I'm an old fart, basically.
Well, you're 1 year old. We're 1 year younger than my dad, I think.
There you go.
Yeah, so not that long.
There you go. Not that far apart, really, but that's probably why we gelled quite well.
Yeah, I noticed that.
We're the same epoch, we're of the same age, really.
Yeah. So anyone listening to this, if there's ever going to be anyone listening to this...
anyone listening and they're our age, you're an old fart. That's it.
Ray, basically, is someone my dad knows through work. So it's kind of... I don't know, I think he sometimes says, like, I don't know, Ray's always there to talk to me about something, and he really appreciates that, I think.
Yeah. And I think the same, mutual respect for your father as well.
Yeah.
We've both been around the block and done several things in our lives which have brought us to the point we're at now, with what I think is probably quite a lot of experience. I wouldn't necessarily say knowledge, but it goes along with it, with experience, some good, some bad, etc.
Yeah.
And in various different industries, all starting from different points, but culminating at some point with a common interest, and that seems to be manufacturing and engineering.
So you find out through time that by trying different things, you find out what you...
Yeah, I mean,
clicks with you.
I started my life as an engineer. I'd had served an apprenticeship in Lincoln for what was a turbine company, Ruston Gas Turbines at the time. I learned my basic engineering skills there, although before that I was building push bikes, tinkering with motorcycles, tinkering with mopeds.
That was your passion when you were younger?
Yeah, anything that had an engine, I tried to make it go.
Similar then.
Yeah, absolutely. Tried to make it go a bit faster and stick it on a trolley or on a skateboard or whatever you did at the time to make it. Yeah, and do things you shouldn't be doing at 14 years old, basically, on wasteland, which was probably illegal, but there you go.
It's all good fun though, isn't it?
So anything that was mechanical, anything that I needed to strip things apart, see how they worked. I needed to understand how an internal combustion engine worked. I needed to know how electricity worked, etc. So that fed my interest into, I guess, science. School science, physics, etc. was fairly basic, so you didn't really learn an awful lot that was practical. So I didn't go A-levels. I left school to go into an engineering apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And from there, in engineering for about 5, 6, 7 years. Learnt all about turbines and electrical controls for turbines as well.
What company was that then?
Ruston's. It was Ruston Gas Turbines. Yeah, the major company in Lincoln, that was a major employer at the time. There were two choices when I was coming of age.
Yeah.
One, I was on a motorcycle, so that was my passion. I managed at 17 years old with my first wage slip to buy my first real motorbike at the end of the day, which was a Yamaha, sadly, not a British bike, but there you go.
Well, that was the
sign of the times in the 70s.
Yeah.
You either went to Dorman Diesels or you went to Ruston Gas Turbines. So diesel engine manufacturer or a turbine manufacturer. And to my mind, turbines were the future. Diesel engines had kind of had their day for me. I thought old, oily, smelly traction units that you'd find on trains and on smaller versions on trucks, and that was it. Not very
So you wanted something that was new and exciting.
Yeah. Old German technology, the diesel engine, but the gas turbine, it came from Sir Frank Whittle and his aero engines in the Second World War. That's what the derivative was. The first industrial gas turbine was a derivative of a Frank Whittle engine. Yeah. So many years before that, there had been water turbines, which effectively just worked off water feeding from a waterfall or a dam or whatever. The power of the turbine, correct? Yeah. This utilised fuel to burn in a jet engine. Yeah. All of us turbine engineers or aerospace engineers always cite the analogy: suck, squeeze, bang, blow. That's what you do. You suck in the air, you squeeze it, you ignite it, and out the back comes a jet. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. That's it.
Sounds nice.
That's what we always use out. And when anybody's talking about jet engines, that's what they do effectively.
Yeah.
So from there. I won a scholarship through GEC. Ruston's were a GEC company. Yeah. They sent me off to do some management training because they thought, okay, you're an okay engineer, but what we need is managing engineers who can manage people. That if you have a pipeline that's being built in Russia, we want somebody that's going to look after 20 engineers up and down this 500 miles of pipeline with 10 pumping stations on it. So you need to understand everything that happens on these turbines, but you need to manage people as well. Yeah, so that's what they did. So I won a scholarship to do that. So they sent me off to what was then Dunchurch Industrial Staff College, which was GC's own college, to do. I'd done sort of ONCs and HNCs in mechanical engineering and electrical engineering. So they sent me off then to do originally a HNC in business studies, and then that went on to a diploma in management studies.
Wow.
That went on to a master's degree, and that went on to a PhD. So after 1983,
wow.
I became Dr. Newell, which was great. You'll never see it on my business cards. You'll never see it anywhere.
I saw it on your. I think I looked at your LinkedIn.
Yeah, occasionally, I put it on the strapline on emails, but don't use the title because people suddenly say to me, "Can you sort this lump out on my hand?" I'm not that kind of doctor.
No.
But computational fluid dynamics is my specialism. There you go.
Right. Okay.
Drop it there, leave it there. Okay.
Well, it's very technical.
That's it. Yeah, it's a very specialised field, and it's about how you can demonstrate a turbine gas flow, basically, by utilising liquids.
Yeah.
That's it, really.
So
basically water test rigs to show how an aircraft engine works, basically.
Shows you how it works.
Yeah, and what happens if you change the pitch of the blades and so on and so forth. So you can demonstrate it without actually being at 30,000 feet and see what happens in a turbine engine. So that was it, really. That was my study part, and I helped to develop some of the larger industrial gas turbines on the back of that at Ruston's, which later became Alstom, which is now Siemens at the end of the day. So
how did you find the transition from like doing, because I'm at that point now, really.
Yeah.
From doing stuff to helping other people do the stuff that you used to do, I guess.
Yeah, managing people is a very difficult thing. Training to be a manager, I thought somebody had handed me the devil's anvil, because managing people is the most difficult thing in the world. You'll know this as yourself running a business.
Can be very stressful.
Everyone's an individual. You can't judge them by your own standards. You have to try and get into their psyche. So it's not like fixing a turbine where you can see the problem and it's a mechanical problem, you can fix it.
No,
you can't fix what goes on in people's heads at the end of the day.
It's kind of blurred,
try,
isn't it? Yeah.
But it ain't going to work at the end of the day. So I found it. I'm an amenable kind of chap. I'm quite big and brusque and whatever. And my hobby at the time was playing guitar and singing, etc. So I was in front of a band and whatever. So I used to compare shows. So I was kind of a bit gregarious. I tried to use that, as well as learning the traits about how to manage people, and use that in my management theme, if you like, of what I did. So I didn't mind standing up in front of an audience and shouting at them, and I didn't mind doing the same in a management meeting, standing up and talking, not shouting at people.
Well, no, but it's, public speaking's a skill, isn't it?
Yeah. So that kind of made me think about what was the future going to do for me. So I did maybe 5 or 6 years with rusting gas turbines coming off them, and then I wanted to get my status elevated in some way. So I was working as an engineering buyer, effectively, in the end. So I was going out to companies, visiting them, and this is where it all started, this networking thing, seeing what they made sure it was compatible with what we did at Ruston's, and then getting them to supply to us, and that became
integrating
procurement activity. So then they sent me then to the Chartered Institute of Purchase and Supply to qualify with a SIPS diploma, so I did that next. So it's like perpetual training. So by the time I was 30, I got so many frigging letters after my name, it was ridiculous, but it didn't mean an awful lot unless you applied it. So I became the purchasing manager then of Napier turbochargers, who were on the same site. Now Napier's is a company with a long history. I mean, that goes back to back in the early 1900s. Napier made cars.
Right.
And a guy called
the early version of
SF Edge was the famous guy who won one of the first Grand Prix in a Napier. And he won a thing called the Gordon Bennett Trophy. That's where the term Gordon Bennett comes from.
Right, yeah.
Cars will be going by Gordon Bennett, and that's where the title came from. And there was a copy of that trophy in Napier's in Lincoln, because he won it in his Napier about 4 times. Yeah. So myself and a couple of other colleagues became real fans of the Napier cars, and we used to go off and visit wherever you could find them, or do the London to Brighton run and things like that. Yeah. And then after that, after 4 or 5 years at Napier's, they did the Schneider Trophy planes and the Spitfire engines as well. The first Spitfire engines were Napier Lions. They were the first Spitfire. So that's it. And then it sort of kind of became turbochargers for the high-speed trains. That was the thing.
They specialised in that after that.
That was the thing I was working on, really.
Trains?
Yeah, high-speed trains. So it's like a turbocharger for the diesel engines, like the Deltic engine. Do you know about the Deltic engine with the triangular shape of the...
Yeah, I do know about that.
Yeah, so that was a Napier's design, and it was the turbochargers for it were provided by Napier's from Lincoln. So that was kind of my end. And I won a second scholarship then. We ran a thing called the GC Business Game, and of the 5,000 GC companies all over the world, you would have one of the first computerised competitions where you'd have a fake company and you'd try and run it and become profitable. And Little Napier's in Lincoln won it, and I was a member of the team. So the 4 people that won it, went to see the then Secretary of State James Pryor, who said to us, "Okay, because you're on the board of GC, where do you want to go? Which part of the you won this? Which part of the organisation do you want to go? I'd like the four of you to go into different companies somewhere in our network. Fly to Australia, fly to America, blah blah."
Wow.
And as it happened, in Lincoln, Marconi Electronic Devices had just moved into Lincoln, and this was state-of-the-art technology. This was silicon chips. This was the future. And I'm thinking,
What year was that then?
This was, for me, 1985.
Yeah, when you got involved in it.
Correct, yeah. So that was the first time I had experience of silicon chip manufacture.
Yeah.
Not only silicon chip manufacture, but a thing called silicon on sapphire, which was effectively radiation-hard devices for satellites.
Wow.
So, this was like, this is the forefront technology. So they sent me to America. So they sent me to McDonnell Douglas in America, where we were developing these things for the satellites. So I was working over there and in the UK. So I was going backwards and forwards, trying to develop this specialist material, which was only made in Japan. It was only grown in Japan because you grew the crystals from scratch.
Wow.
Basically, it was like
a natural product.
Correct, yeah. So it was a grown crystal from scratch in machinery in Japan. So if for like a fake gemstone, effectively, it was then sliced and then put inside, encapsulated in ceramic, and that ceramic then came from Japan as well. But the gold lead frames came from America, so you had to go around the world to get these things together to work. Each one of these chips was sold at $200,000 a piece. It was ridiculous. Jeez. The yield was dramatically low.
And that was for satellites?
Yeah, so basically for the Star Wars program, that was what it was for.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The weaponry system that was devised by NASA, supposedly to take out Russian satellites should it come to war in space. So spy satellites were just being launched. You know, the U-2 spy planes today gone because they shot one down, so satellites were becoming the technology. So to stop them spying, you wanted a satellite in space that could zap another satellite with a laser or whatever. To protect from it, you needed your devices to be radiation hard. Not only that, when you get up into the atmosphere and beyond the ozone layer, there's gamma radiation all over the place. It's just out there. It's our ozone layer that stops it coming in and killing us all, basically. When you get up into orbit, it's gamma radiation bombarding everything. So the space programs had seen some failures of early silicon chips because of the continual bombardment of protons and electrons, effectively. So they wanted to work on how they could protect it. So you had to have this insulator. So the silicon was mounted on sapphire, which acted as an insulator. The gamma radiation couldn't get through it and could sustain itself after a burst of radiation. So if it got hit by a gamma gun or whatever, the other Russian satellites would be pulsing at it. Wow. So that was it. So that was working in the skunk works and all sorts of weird places over in the States. Just it was mind blowing, honestly, mind blowing stuff for about 5 or 6 years. Yeah. So I had 2 years doing that, then came back. And then Marconi were working on telephone dialer chips at the time, which was the common million of them. You know, so that everybody's telephone had a dialer chip in it. Yeah. So your pulse tone dialing instead of your normal, phone.
Actual buttons. You know.
Correct. So the pulse tone dialing, electronics, pulse control of the dial tone managed from a silicon chip, basically. And they weren't actually made in great numbers in Lincoln. They were actually subcontracted out to the Philippines, Taiwan.
As the world was changing, I suppose.
Yeah, so and sadly, I mean, I went out to see some of the factories and they were horrible conditions, awful conditions. You know, where it wouldn't be allowed today.
Wouldn't pass.
No, there are kids working on the shop floor, 6 or 7 years old. You know, putting gallium arsenide, which is highly toxic, into pots to contain it to make devices. It was just totally wrong, but I'm afraid that's how it was done back in the day. And if you wanted your silicon dialer chips at 20 pence instead of 25 pence, that's what you had to do. So South Africa, Philippines, Taiwan and Japan were the prime sources of silicon chips for those. Yeah. So Marconi and GEC went bust in 1992. Bang, bomb. Everything went wrong because...
That was quite soon after you were there.
I was there for 7 years before it all went bust. So effectively I found myself on the dole. Yeah. I was redundant.
How old were you then?
So what would I be then? So just into my 30s, really. So just really thinking... And married, but with no kids. Wife had stayed here when I went to the States, so she was working in a bank at the time. She was working for the old Midland Bank. Right. So we'd got a nice cheap mortgage for the Midland Bank. So that was great. So if I was away, all of my accommodation, etc., was funded, so I could just send the money back, and she was able to pay the mortgage off fairly quickly. Which was great news, on the little bungalow that we bought.
How often did you come back to the UK then during the time?
Only, I think it was 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off.
Right. Okay.
So effectively, if you were over there all the time, but it never kind of worked out like that. You do 3 weeks over there, and then you think, I need to be back in the UK to do the next bit of there. So you come back for 3 weeks.
Yeah, so it actually benefited you to come back.
Yeah, so it was a lot of flying, more air miles than I care to remember. But it was at the time, it was wow, it was just mind blowing stuff. It was just state of the art. Still blows my mind thinking about some of the technologies that we actually developed in the UK that we then exported to the US and other countries who then copied it.
Yeah.
If we'd have capitalised on it properly, we'd have been much further on the electronics industry. As it is now, we don't have a wafer fabrication company in this country at all. It's all about we let it all go in the 80s and 90s, and to reinvest would cost billions. It's not going to happen.
It's a total rejig of our whole society.
But now you see what's happening now. They can't get chips for cars from China.
Yeah.
They control the industry now. China really controls.
They choose what they put it into, don't they?
Yeah, I'm afraid, if they decided, right, Europe, you're not getting anything, we can't make this stuff in Europe anymore. It's not just us, it's Germany, it's France.
Is it access to the materials as well?
Yeah, but you could, like we saw with the silicon on sapphire, we managed to invent another material called silicon on insulator, and you could use any other medium to isolate and insulate the silicon device, what actually the triggers and the switches inside of the silicon device, with any kind of insulator. It didn't need to be a sapphire, so tremendously expensive to grow sapphire.
Yeah.
So you could use other
something more
thin film, hardened glass and things like that would do as good a job, or at least 50% of the job, which was good for normal radiation on the planet, if you like. It wasn't necessarily brilliant for satellites, but the market for that was pretty damn limited. If you wanted to do something on the deck and work for the military, it had to be sensitively rad hard, but not massively rad hard. So we were able to find other resources. So we could have kept the industry here, but we wouldn't have probably sold to the rest of the world. I mean, we had, we were doing Nokia chips over here initially. That's where all Nokia's telephone chips were made here. But GEC...
That's amazing, I didn't know that.
Yeah, GEC...
So we basically came up with the ideas.
Exactly. Well, there was the mobile phone idea, but to get to that point, they took bits from all over the world to make it. But then they tooled up their own industry.
Yeah.
But they were still buying their chips from the Philippines, and they weren't making them themselves until they started to manufacture their own silicon. And a company called Autocompu, which was their main silicon manufacturer, was growing its own silicon.
Really?
Slicing and dicing, so they were making their own chips then. So that it became insular, and Nokia became Nokia, and billion pound industry at the end of the day, multi-trillion pound industry. So after that, when GEC went bust, and I found myself on the dole, I joined the local college and started lecturing.
Did you?
So part-time lecturing.
Yeah.
And then my alma mater, Sheffield University, heard I was on the teaching network and said, "Do you want to come over and do some lecturing at Sheffield Uni?" So I did a little bit over there. Yeah. And then opportunity came along to be a materials manager for I suppose you'd call it an agricultural company. J. Arthur Bowers, based in the Central Link, and they used to make fertilisers.
I think I know
J. Arthur Bowers is well known for his rose fertiliser made from...
I've definitely heard my dad talk about
I used to call it bagging shit, excuse my French. And that's what it was. It was manure-based composts with various added things, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK levels as they call them, to boost the soil. So you could put it into soils, spread it on your roses, and it would help them bloom. Yeah, so you had liquid fertiliser, you had poo, you had peat, and it was all bagged at a site in Lincoln, effectively. So my job was to find where the raw materials could come from, purchase them, buy the plastic bags that they went into, make sure that the way that it was manufactured and bagged was okay. Because it sounds a simple job, but it's actually not. Trying to bag an 80-litre bag of compost and make it look good as a retail sales item, not fade in the sunshine and always look like a full bag. Quite a complicated thing to do at the end of the day. And the bottling plants were constantly breaking down. We had to reinvent the bottling plants that we'd bought from over.
That's all gone. Basically, that's all gone. Design of the machine to do the work for you.
Yeah. So it was very manual to start with. Basically, people shoveling their stuff and throwing it into bags, basically, and then it had to be mechanised. So they tried to, in a Heath Robinson way, put the machinery together that would bag or fill bottles or whatever, and it was very Heath Robinson. And in the end, we had to buy some proper machinery, that was 10 times as fast as the machinery that they invented themselves
to keep up with it.
But it was called Sinclair Horticulture, the parent company. Peter Sinclair was the boss. When I joined the company, he was 80 years old. He passed away when I was there, but his sons ran the business. But they were not particularly good managers at the end of the day, and in the end, after a couple of years, I decided it wasn't for me. And by that time, I'd got another job offer to go and work for the government. So I started working for the government for the DTI, Department of Trade and Industry, as I'd done some work in the States and whatever. as an ambassador for selling product in the US and wider afield.
Yeah.
And did that for about a year, and then an opportunity came along to run a thing called the National Procurement Network.
Yeah.
And it was a scheme that the DTI devised, whereby we were pretty poor. Imagine you're going back before laptops and computers, so we're talking like very early 90s, etc. And we were still, if you were in an engineering company, Compass, Kelly's and Sells were the three directories where you get all of the industrial companies from, and they would gladly sell you this voluminous Bible every year full of companies that made everything.
So
and it was your job as a buyer to try and find them.
Wow, and that was in the mid-90s, was it?
That was the beginning of the 90s. Okay,
Crazy
so
how it's changed.
working towards making that mechanised, the piece of work done by a guy called Michael Porter, who was a well-known American author, business author, business guru or whatever, and he did a programme for the UK government called Clusters, a First Assessment.
Yeah.
And his idea was to look at industrial clusters, see why they were born and why they survived and how they were made and formed, etc. And he realised that what actually happened in a lot of cases was that people that were in the middle of these clusters came together, very much like in the Stone Age, where you cluster around a watercourse or a cave or whatever, because everything was there.
That you needed, yeah.
So clusters came together like that. But what you tend to find, though, is you also get dispersed pockets of industry with people over here and people over here that wanted to be here but weren't.
Yeah, yeah.
So how did the people here know where those people were? They had these three directories, and that was it, really. So the idea was to put people in each of the regions of the UK, and I was the East Midlands, to try and help, and there were about 7 of us, and the idea was we'd get opportunities from companies where they couldn't find what they were looking for, and help them to find it.
Within their area?
With as close as we could to them to make the supply chains the best they could. Yeah. But bearing in mind, when anybody, I was always taught this as a procurement guy, we use a formula called QQPDS, Quality, Quantity, Price, Delivery, Service. Yeah. If you don't get the quality first, you don't go any further. There's no point, because if you're talking about a Rolls-Royce engine as an example, you have to make sure you're a Rolls-Royce approved supplier before you can supply them with anything. So price is irrelevant. It can be a tenth the price of whatever you got, but if it ain't the right quality, it's useless. So we had that criteria in mind. So what we would do is we'd go out and we'd find people that professed to sell the materials this company wanted, and then we'd look at them and vet them and say, these are our, not recommendations, these are the companies we think could do the job for you. You need to now make your own connections, meet them. So we would go and see them, have a look at them. And this is where the networking kind of began, really. Then invite them to come in. And our outputs, our KPIs were effectively on how much business was won by these companies. So we were, in the East Midlands, we were always top dogs. We had some really good procurement guys. And the reason for that is that the Chartered Institute of Purchase Supply is based in Lincolnshire. The headquarters is based in Lincolnshire. So we were all SIPS trained. We were all good procurement professionals, and we knew how to do this. Whereas in other areas, they just recruited ordinary business people who really didn't know procurement very well, so they weren't very good at it. So we regularly managed to sort of demonstrate this is how it should be done, and we kind of wrote the book for them. And that lasted, while we didn't still have everybody having a laptop, like which kind of came about 93, 94, 95, when laptops became usable, etc. And then we needed to computerise this service. And by that time, Kelly's, Compass and Sells had thought, actually, so do we. So we need to... So it became... We became non-essential then, so the programme was shut down. So I then went to follow up on the cluster development activity that Michael Porter had started, and each one of the development agencies had then just been set up. So I was then seconded as part of a cluster network for the East Midlands. So the clusters that we had in the East Midlands, the prime ones were aerospace and automotive, based on Rolls-Royce and Toyota in Derbyshire and the periphery. So unfortunately, one of my projects was to shut down the Rover Task Force.
Oh, really, was it?
Yeah. Shut down the clothing and textiles industry across Nottingham, Derbyshire, etc., where it was prevalent, but was not really making clothes anymore because it's all gone out to the Far East, etc. And other areas like that. So I had those really sad times of people being made redundant, what we're going to do with these companies, how can we redeploy them in the industry. And then I was given the focus on aerospace. So in 2002, when 9/11 happened, Rolls-Royce decided to make 1,000 people redundant in Derby, which was on my patch. So the development agency were asked to intervene because there was a trade body called the Society of British Aerospace Companies, SBAC, but they had no connection with small and medium enterprises. So when Rolls-Royce made 1,000 people redundant, their supply chain was hit fourfold. So 4,000 people were going to be made redundant in their manufacturing supply chain in the East Midlands and West Midlands. So it was East and West Midlands. So I was asked to help with the Rolls-Royce task force. I was seconded to Rolls-Royce for what effectively turned out to be for 4 years in the end. So met Sir John Rose, who was the head of Rolls-Royce corporate at the time in Derby, with my then boss Martin Briggs, and we said, okay, we've got some money in the pot for the development agency, we can help with the redeployment of your staff and the people in the supply chain, but we need to do these certain things. So we set up a couple of programmes, one of which was the setting up of a thing called the Midlands Aerospace Alliance, a cluster body around which you could find out why. So Rolls-Royce was kind of at the heart of it, because East Midlands, from an aerospace point of view, was engines and wings. So we have a lot of composites activity in the East Midlands. So the DTI set up on the back of the problems that they were having with 9/11 cancelling orders and so on, Rolls-Royce getting orders cancelled everywhere, a thing called the National Aerospace Technology Strategy. So I was seconded in then for Rolls-Royce to do the environmentally friendly engine programme, which was the new engine to be supposedly a green, lean burning thing. So on the back of that, having set up the East Midlands Aerospace Alliance, we then decided, actually, this isn't wide enough, so we need to make it the Midlands. So we joined up with the West Midlands Development Agency, Advantage West Midlands. I put in, I think it was about £700,000 from our development agency. They put in a similar amount, we matched it, and we started actually creating a broker network to talk to the companies, find out what they wanted, then offer them, through the money we got, programmes of help and support. Things like an engineering redeployment group. So what was happening was people who were leaving the aerospace industry, Rolls-Royce, and getting some fairly substantial payouts as well from the redundancy packages, having been working at Rolls-Royce for 20 years. Whether going off and being taxi drivers or hairdressers or whatever. We said, this is a drift away from manufacturing. This is not good at the end of the day. And this was happening in the supply chain as well. So the idea of the redeployment group was to effectively try and get them back into manufacturing, back into engineering. And it was quite a successful programme, and it still actually exists today, 20 years on, as a national redeployment programme. So it did kind of work. And
still there.
So does the MAA, the Midlands Aerospace Alliance, still exists. The guy I put in charge of it, Dr. Andrew Mayer, is still the CEO. He's been there for 20. In fact, we met up in Lincoln at the Castle Hill Club about just before Christmas for a chat and a talk about how it's still going and whatever, and it's still got 300 members and still doing its job effectively. So I was quite proud of that. It was our invention, and we did all that. So after that, in the middle of that, I should say, sadly my wife got cancer. So she's back in Lincoln, I'm based in Derby, so I had to say, look, I can't really do this while my wife's pretty seriously ill. So I took some time out, a little bit of time out to look after her, and she's fine. Went into complete remission, but she needed to be people around her, young kids, etc. It was a time to be at home, so I spent a bit of time at home. And then after that, I went to work for a company called Lindham Construction. You might have heard of them. I knew the boss. We'd actually, back in the day, about 5-6 years before, with the development agency, helped them to move from their old building into the old paper mill by setting up an incubator network on the top floor, which we part funded, they part funded. And then they decided they wanted the whole building, so they then moved into it. So I went to work for them as their marketing director for about a year. Not really my bag, but it meant I was in Lincoln. I was close to home. I did that for a year. And then after that, a great friend of mine, a guy called John Hensley, who runs a company called Antistat, who I'd met in my days at Marconi, who used to supply me with all of the, what I guess you call it, PPE, clothing to work in it's like working in the medical industry when you're working in electronics. Complete bunny suit, gloves, hat, gown, and glass, and all the tools that we used. All the tools that we used, building clean rooms, all that sort of thing. So I went down to East Anglia, and my wife was better, and worked for him for 2 years to help him set up a business in Romania. So I went over to Romania and spent some time over there setting up a facility for him. Then came back, realised I was away from home when I shouldn't be away from home again. So then a great friend and obviously colleague and co-director of mine, John Kelly, ran this company, Aircon Management Services. And he was primarily dealing with ISO 9000 accreditation. But when he heard I was coming back to Lincoln and potentially not coming to a job, he said, no, come and join me. You can use my company name. If you want to do what you do, Ray, your network are broken, do it under Oakwell's banner, and we can work together to do this. So that's what the last 15 years has been, really. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's really interesting.
Very big nutshell.
That's really interesting. I didn't expect that. I didn't know what to expect.
You've got to grow with it. You've got to change. Like at the moment, I like what your farm's trying to do with, the thermal drilling. I'm very, very much into sustainability. Working with people like Andy Harsley, very much into plastics. The problem with microplastics, problem with plastics recyclability. I'm all for trying to experiment with those kinds of materials to see what we can do to stop 40% of scrap plastic still going into landfill.
Yeah, that's the thing that worries me about what we do at Pyramid.
Yeah,
and
but you have no alternative. People say, let's ban plastics. You can't. It's just too entrenched into what we do. Unless you find alternative, sustainable materials, you can't just simply turn things off like that.
No, you have
plastics has its place. There is an issue of leaching microplastics into the environment, which we can deal with. We're clever enough engineers to deal with that. We can seal plastics so they don't do that. But in doing that, they become non-biodegradable.
Yes.
Andy and I have been working on biodegradable ties for the last 5 years, and we've finally kind of got there now, where we've got a biodegradable tie that will actually biodegrade properly. Where a lot of people profess they can do it, but they can't do it. So the first million orders just about to hit the desk, I think.
Really?
But then the problem of making them then comes.
Getting them.
We've got one. We have what I mentioned, the quick tooling suite, and I was over with Andy this morning. And the plastic injection mold machine. We need another one now to put in his premises to actually cater for doing just the samples. And then we've got to put £50,000 down on a tool to make the production volumes.
You did mention this last time. Where is this quick tool?
Grantham.
Grantham,
Yeah. Andy Harsley's based in Grantham. He's got a little industrial unit, about the same size as you got here, I think. I say a little industrial unit. It's quite spacious. Yeah, it's quite spacious, but it's very cold in the winter. Really doesn't put any heating on, and he tends to run close to his machine to keep him warm, etc. But he can make anything in plastic. He's a genius in plastic injection moulding. He's really, really good. On this wonderful old 35-year-old Arberg machine that he's got there, he's incredibly competent at doing that.
That sounds really interesting. I'd like to come and see that. Actually.
Yeah, at some point, if I can, we'll get him over here to talk to you at some point. We'll just get him over to see what I did speak to him about some of the stuff you do. From our perspective, from a quick tooling perspective, curves are always an issue. Curves are an issue. Because
it's 3D printed.
It just makes it. No, I think from moulding, plastic injection moulding, once you've got past the tooling phase, is always the cheapest plastic method of manufacture. Possibly apart from vacuum forming, I think. If you want volume numbers of any plastic part, it's got to be injection moulding, but you've got to get over the tooling problem.
Exactly,
at the end of it. So we found, as I said to you, the quick tooling option, which is using aluminium lightweight tools in a steel bolster, can get you through 1,000 impressions or whatever, and can be used in production. Most things that you get off a rapid prototype, unless they're infused with metals, you can't really use in high temperature areas and so on and so on and so on. So if you want them to work to up to almost the maximum melt temperature of plastic, it's got to be injection moulded at the end of the day. So there is a market for all of these things. And there's a gap in between them somewhere where everything fits in. What's the right type of way to do this? The cheapest method for volume manufacturing is still plastic injection moulding at the end of the day. For the each chunk.
If you're sure on the part and you know you're going to need them.
But we did have that chat, and I did say I'll come and talk to you today about it. Getting curves into them is problematic. It can be done. But it may, rather than it being, and I will cite it. If I wanted to make something like that bobbin in plastic, a £200 tool would do it. Whereas something more complicated, something that's not necessarily flat, something that's slightly curved, your price goes up because you have to have the basic form made first. And then moulding the flow, and Andy will talk ad nauseam about this, flow of plastics around a mould is what he knows. He knows what he can and can't do. So he needs to see parts, he needs to know what you want doing. So if it was something simple like the plastic carriers for the reflectors, something like that, piece of cake, all those all day long, and you can get them out of recycled plastic as well, black in colour. And
so something like a mudguard on a bike is completely different.
It is. It's not that it can't be moulded, but the tools required to do it would be £50,000. And your numbers aren't really there necessarily unless you triumph and you want to make them in house from a plastic. They're not really there to do it at the end of the day. So that's why we came up with the quick route to market for most people that are prototyping, and really can't afford their own rapid prototyper, but I've got a couple of £100 to spend on some lightweight tooling. We'll make you 1,000 samples. If that's what you need to get to market. And it will cost you maybe £300 to do the whole thing. Whereas if you went
people need that. They need the experience of going through the process.
I think once you talk them through it and show them what it entails, and what we tended to do was when people wanted something, was bring them in to see the moulding being done as well, see how what you need to do to control it.
Yeah.
And when there are issues of the plastic not flowing in the mould, how it's resolved, and how Andy tweaks this machine to make it work. It's a bit of magic watching him do it sometimes.
Knows how to use it.
If anything goes wrong on the machine, he knows exactly what to. Yeah,
sounds like
in his own right,
craft.
and he'll tell you he's a failed degree student. He never managed to get through his degree at the end of the day, but he's such a practical guy. People come to him with problems to be solved, and that's what he does. And I like to think I'm kind of like that, and that's why we sort of gel quite well together. So we'll
ad hoc sort of thing.
Always come up with a solution to something, I think.
Do you think? When you said about your wife, it made me think. Did that kind of change your outlook quite a lot when that happened, or towards work? When she got cancer, did it change how you thought you go forward?
You sort of look at your life and think, what's the most important thing in your life? And for some people it wouldn't necessarily be their wife, but for me it was.
Yeah.
So it made me give up a career I'd still be in probably now, working for government somewhere, I would think. Because once you're in the public sector, you tend not to leave. It's very unusual to leave the public sector.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't give me a leave of absence. I couldn't get time off for it not being me that was ill. And they were demanding that I would have to do work from home, etc. And it couldn't be done. It was just 24/7 care and attention. You couldn't do that, really. It's like if one of your parents became critically ill and you had to look after them, you can't focus on doing that and work at the same time.
No.
I had 2 young kids at the time, 2 and 4, and they needed looking after at the end of the day. So it was the right thing to do. I regret it still today because I thought it was I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, it's a massive change.
Meeting people all day long in so many different industries. I mean, I could tell you some of the projects that I actually took part in because I was the material specialist for a period of time. I was obviously doing fabric and textiles, meeting some of the textiles companies and the machinery in the textiles industry, incredible, some of it at the end of the day. Yeah. But we ended up 3D weaving fabrics for carbon composites for the Airbus. One of the textiles companies in Nottingham.
You never expected it.
No, absolutely not, mate. No. And then I helped build the first tram line in Nottingham. So I did all the sourcing for all of the product, so that we tried to make sure that all the product came from local suppliers rather than from all over the country. And we, of the £120 million spent, 40 million of it was spent in Nottingham and around the area. Wow. So to make it, that was my job, was to make sure. So Tramline 2, when I was working for Oakwell, I did the same again for Tramline 2. We went to Adtrans when it was bought out by Bombardier because they were thinking of closing it down, because I can remember meeting the CEO from Bombardier because they're very much into aircraft, but they bought Adtrans, this train company, in the middle of Derby, quite next to Rolls-Royce, and the CEO coming in and saying with his French accent, I don't think trains are very sexy, they're not like aircraft, I'm not sure we want to keep this business open. I'm thinking, crap, that's fine, isn't it? But we did, we kept them open in the end, we convinced them it was the right thing to do, shoved them a bit of money, obviously, to do it, and they are still there today, operating as Bombardier, so...
it worked then.
Yeah, sadly couldn't do the same for the Rover Task Force, that was just a matter of closing the place down.
Well.
But there was a lot of fallout from companies that needed to be found, other business, etc. Not all of them did, we managed to find some of them some business, but it was really hard work. But I was then a specialist in the niche vehicle network as well, where Otis Cars, Ginetta, looking at specialist vehicles, because they couldn't get the funding because they were perceived to be like kit car manufacturers, etc. So giving them an identity, getting funding into their...
Ginetta are a big brand now, aren't they?
But yeah, Ginetta is the biggest one-make series in the world. I mean, from a guy that... His wife, it was his wife's money. I can never remember the name of the guy that ran it, based in Peterborough. And his wife's company in the States made toning tables. These exercise tables. That's where the money came from.
That's where it came from. Never expected.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. Yeah. And in fact, when you looked at his company in the UK, SIC code said fitness equipment. It didn't say manufacturing cars for a long while until Ginetta went to talk, and they struggled. Ginetta's name has been around for quite some time now. But the first cars off the blocks, well, they're just kit cars basically. Yeah. But then as they became production orientated, but they focused very much on racing. Yeah. So when I leave here, 4:30, I'm going around to Rob Boston. Do you know Rob Boston Racing around the corner?
No.
He's Mr. Ginetta.
Oh, is he? Okay.
He ran 7 of the Ginetta teams and has won everything. Yeah. Ginetta have won by managing the teams. He's got a room like this that's just full of trophies. It's amazing.
He lives nearby then?
Yeah. He lives just outside of Gainsborough, but he's got on the other estate just across the road. What's it called? This is the other industrial estate. He's on there with
Naming it.
Race-to-Rations. There's two of them there.
Yeah, I know.
Race-to-Rations do like refurbs.
Yeah.
He builds race cars. So my BSB rider, Aaron Sylvester, is his chief mechanic.
Bloody hell.
It's how these things are connected
It's
sometimes.
crazy, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So he's looking for a special testing machine.
Yeah.
That instead of a rolling road brake dynamometer, you put it onto the hubs of the car. So if you've got a four-wheel drive car, you can individually test the output of the individual four wheels. So
Right.
he needs 100 grand for that. So I'm trying to help him get some. So that's what I'm seeing him for today.
Yeah.
But so
I'll have a look at some other questions. Then. I should have done this while you were talking, really. So how do you feel about the way it's, you know, 'cause obviously you spend time with new people all the time in manufacturing. How do you feel about how it is nowadays in the UK? Obviously, it's changed a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah, working in government, you have to keep a constant eye on what the level of manufacturing is in your particular region.
Yeah.
From an East Midlands perspective, when I first started working for the DTI, the East Midlands, as an example, had something like 23% of its GDP in manufacturing.
Mm.
That's now down to 15%.
Right.
So it's dropped off a lot. Yes, it's there's more work in research and development than there ever has been before.
Mm.
But what tends to happen is we don't make it here.
No.
We don't have the facilities
No.
to base manufacture. We don't have the ability to create wealth in many cases. A lot of the manufacturing goes elsewhere. Now, everybody's, including Rishi Sunak's, rethinking this now, thinking we've divested so far that when it comes to taking this great idea that we had and trying to make it, we can't do it here. But you look at what's the news today, 800 Johnson Scunthorpe.
Yeah.
Steel mills. You get rid of the last steel mills we've got in the UK, the ability to produce steel.
Yeah.
It's another step on that rocky road to being a service nation and not a
I
manufacturing.
think they're changing the tide on it because we've had a couple of R&D claims in the last couple of years. And it's something we haven't been doing, which we should have been doing.
Yeah.
And just recently they've changed the rules on it slightly.
Yeah.
And basically, one of the main things that I found quite interesting is the fact that they're not going to fund people who outsource things to different countries.
Yeah.
So basically, that's saying do it here.
Yeah, correct. And there is a feeling that we do have to do more of a Buy British campaign.
Yeah.
If I'm brutally honest with you, I've just written to BEIS, BEIS, the business engineering industry, to a guy that actually wrote to me because I was very argumentative about manufacturing in One Victoria Street about a year ago.
Yeah.
I went down for a manufacturing conference,
Right.
and he said, "I'd like to talk to you some more about manufacturing. Can we spend a bit of time with you or whatever?" I said, "I'm very happy to, but first I need to write to you and explain my position." And I said to him, what we need to do is we need to become more sovereign orientated again, but we need to be smart. We need to really use the procurement tools that we have at our disposal to make sure that we buy right and invest right. And the grant money that we've got from Europe, this last year we need to really capitalise and make sure we keep it here and use it, but invest in the right things.
Yeah.
And you've got to rethink some of the policies that you've got, like you guys as an example. It's hard to get funding for someone that is not business to business. It's business to customer. That's one of the big problems that we've got.
They're trying to cut it down, basically.
I'm trying to, that's the issue. But if you only do business to business, that means you cut out half of the manufacturing industry, like you, that is still doing some parts of it, but can't get a grant because you're not selling to another business.
Yeah.
That's got to be wrong at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, we sell, I don't know how it works for us because we sell obviously to customer, but we do sell to business as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we fall on
It's
that.
a mix. In most cases, the mix has been 50% minimum business to business.
Right, okay.
And then you can be funded.
I think we're over that. Actually.
Okay.
So
Then
maybe we're all right.
Okay.
But
This is the problem I've got with Rob Boston though, because yes, he wants to get more involved with big race teams. So if you can demonstrate you're aspirational to go business to business, because most of his customers are usually wealthy businessmen.
Yeah.
So some of them put it on their business, so you can make it look like it's
You
real
can
business.
make it work, yeah.
But it's like Gregor Fiskin. I don't know if you've heard of Gregor Fiskin. If you ever watch any of the Goodwood programmes, he's always on there with an Aston Martin from 1930 or whatever. He's got a shed load of these cars, but he's also a businessman, but he also has a collection of classic cars to die for, and he's always at these events. And he's got several cars in Rob's warehouse that he's working on, etc. And he said, but he always invoices it as Gregor Fiskin Limited.
Yeah.
So it's not, but
It's
he's just he's just a millionaire basically. But technically, that's B2C and not B2B.
Yeah.
So that can be an issue, and that has to be sorted out. So I don't know whether I get a response.
Do you
back
feel
or
like
not.
things need to change then a bit?
I think if we're going to try and be more sovereign, try and create more in this country, we're going to have to invest an awful lot of money to make that happen. And we're going to have to, things like the changes to the tax regimes are going to have to be, you're going to disincentivise people actually subcontracting the manufacturing to China or to wherever else. If we can make it here, provided we can sell it, and this is the other issue, we've got this the Buy British campaign again.
Yeah.
If you can get people to buy it on the label, although it might be 2 pence dearer, but if you can buy it because it's made in Britain and you can afford to that extra 2p a piece or whatever, then try and do that, because that will help industry. That's where it's going to go.
That would lift everything, wouldn't it?
Correct. It would actually help to make it.
I mean, everything I do is, I'm thinking about the main suppliers I use. There's a guy in Boston,
Yeah.
there's a guy in Leeds, there's 2 companies in Leeds that we use for vacuum forming, to get a lot of sheet metal made in Manchester,
Yeah.
And a lot of 3D print. I used to do a lot of 3D printing myself, but I haven't got enough time to do that. So I get all that done in stone.
Yeah. See how you're spread all over though as well.
Yeah.
Because if I'd been coming to see you back in the day at Procurement, I'd say, sure you can't get your fabrications more local than that.
Probably
if I said to you, I've got 50 fabricators in Lincolnshire, have you looked at them all? And you'd probably say no. And I'd say, let me look at them for you. Yeah. Give me some drawings and I'll get you some numbers. And that's what we would do. So to shorten your supply chains at the end of the day, it means you save money. It's as simple as that. Even if your first pass quotations aren't going to be good enough, because everybody's going to want to put their own profit margins into these things. If you've got a relationship working with a good company as well, breaking that cycle can be a problem because it's successful. Yeah. But if you find there's somebody 2 miles away from you, and believe me, I found people on the same industrial estate that didn't know they were there. And changed them to doing it. You know, it can be like that.
I found a place called Finner on the middle of the estate.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about them until a couple of years ago, and now they do some welding for us.
Yeah.
But it's the way the internet works, and it's the way people of my age have been brought up.
That's made a massive difference, though. You know, in terms of like when back in the day we'd have Kelly's Compass and Sales as 3 directories. You've got the internet now, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic. It's a world beating. I've never imagined it 30 years ago it would be this good. So you can find anything on the internet. But what it does do is it gives you a load of options as well. But even now, not everybody's on the internet.
Yeah.
So a local guy around the corner that's just bought, 2 nice new TIG packs and can weld anything and is great at it because he's come out of the guy in the corner that makes a massive exhaust or whatever, but is on his own now. You won't necessarily know about that, but you should do if that's what you're going to want. So how do you get to know about that? There still has to be some bit of brokerage in there somewhere. Yeah. I don't think the business support that you get from them is very good.
I think that's interesting that you say that, because I've used a couple of local companies. I'm thinking about it more now, because at one point it was like price, that's all I care about. And I did keep it in the UK, I was interested in that, but it's interesting that you say that. I mean, there's a couple of companies just in Gainesville that could do some of our products.
Yeah. I know as a procurement guy, every year when I worked for Rustons, there were 2 things that I would do. I'd source everything, just to try and find out where the other companies were. Even if they were not viable, I'd still go and look at them, see them, do an appraisal on them, just to see what they were like, see what the development plans are, because maybe in a year's time they'd be better and good enough to do it. Yeah. And I'd also, prior to any potential January the 1st price increases, write to them in December and say, guess what guys, we're dropping our prices this year, before they got to me. Yeah. So that's, I'd challenge it before they got to me, and it would make them rethink. Yeah. And instead of asking for 17%, they come back and ask for 7%. Yeah. So it would make a difference. Cost avoidance rather than a saving, but it would save the hassle at that time when you're under pressure, because they would then say, we're going to stop supplying to you. Yeah. So you need my procurement book. You need to have a copy. Yeah. I've given one to your dad before.
Probably, yeah.
But I'll bring you one. It's called Manage My Spend, and it's about tricks for SMEs to learn how to procure better, and part of that is sourcing and quotation analysis, things like that. Have a copy, please, because this is what I, as Oakwood, did for 5 years. I just went round to over 100 companies and delivered this programme of how to save money and how to spend your money better. So please, if there's anything to be learned from it, have a look through it.
Please,
you'll find a few tips and hints in there about what
100%. Yeah, I'd really like to have a look at that. I think it's something I don't really know enough about, really.
Fine.
Bit of a generic one. This is a question that I've sent you that podcast that I listened to, didn't I? Lex Friedman podcast. Yeah. He always asks people this. He says, how can a young person build a life and a career that they can be proud of? It's a very big, sweeping question.
Yeah, I've made some mistakes.
But it's just, what do you think about that?
About my career progress and pathway through it, you mean?
Yeah, and what have you learned, and what do you think? What would you say to a young person?
I've learned a lot about people.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm probably any better at managing them than I was 25 years ago, because people have grown up at the same pace as I have in that way and learnt to. If I was working in a business relationship, you've always used to have an adversarial buyer-supplier relationship type of thing. That's kind of got closer together, where you tend to be more partnershipy than you were in the past. Yeah. I've kind of learnt to be more tolerant of people and differences. Yeah. I've learned never to take anything on face value.
Yeah,
Always investigate it yourself. Trust yourself more than you trust anybody else. Trust in your own talent. Trust in your own ability. But never be frightened to challenge anything.
Yeah.
Anything. Even if a million people are telling you it's the right thing, just if you don't think it's right, question it yourself and be validated. If they validate it, great. If they can't validate it, then maybe there's a question to be asked why do it in the first place. I probably would do things slightly differently in certain areas. Yeah. But they're very circumstantial in terms of the particular
jobs. Who you are as well, I think.
As well as my business life, I've done other things. Like I had a record company.
Really?
And recorded 2 or 3 bands, etc. Went down to Abbey Road, did some recording, whatever. Wow. Big mistake, cost me a shed load of money, never got me anywhere, so I probably wouldn't do that again. It was fun at the time. Probably wouldn't do that again. I still run a promotions company where we do charity events. I wish in my time I'd done more for charity than I have done. So cancer research. Yeah. We have a room at Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital that we populated with machinery, so I'm very proud of that. I wish we could have done more.
So I suppose what you're saying is like be more. You would say be more aware of others around you a bit more. I suppose.
I wish I'd spent more time with my kids. I never spent enough time with my kids growing up. When you're trying to build a career, going off to the States and going off to East Anglia and whatever, I wish I'd not done that and spent time with the kids more. Yeah. I would know them better than I know them now. They're both lovely kids, but I wish I'd known them better. It's soon gone. They're both coming up to their 30s now, and you think, I've missed a lot of time there with them.
Yeah, but you've still got now.
You never get that back, and maybe when you retire, but then passing on the experiences that you learn in your working life can be valuable in your own life as well. The lessons that you've learned. So things like the procurement about getting best value for your book, you take it to your personal life. Yeah. When you're buying anything, always challenge the price, always ask to have some discount, all those kind of simple things that you think you didn't do because it's a retail price, but you can do. Yeah. You know, and in some cases the retailer respects you for actually trying that. And
they understand that you're on their level.
Yeah. And I think now is the time for a lot of that to come to fruition. Yeah. I regret still not sharing as much as I could with other people. There's more to be shared. Yeah. You know, and that's hopefully what we can continue to do until we decide that we're no longer in the networks and able to do this. The informal networks that are coming along now, things like the Hackspace, things like what you're trying to do here, etc., can only serve well. Social media has got its place in all of this.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's a part of a portfolio of how you market what you do. There's a bit about you being personal and talking like you and I are doing now. There's a bit about putting it on social media. There's a bit about doing it formally. Yeah. There's a bit about putting your website out there. All of these things, even the paperwork, your cards, your flyers, all of that adds to what you do to make your image and the impression that you want to give to people.
It's a way of finding people, isn't it?
Just make sure you live up to it. That's all really. Yeah. Don't let people down. Don't build up their expectations and dash those expectations. That's what I've found. I've tried to, in my life, deliver everything I promised to deliver. Yeah. And I don't think, with the exception of the record business, I don't think I've failed to deliver on much that I've done, really. No. You know, as in a failure, as in a complete and utter disaster. Yeah, seen it through, did it, achieved something, learnt something from it, take that forward with you.
I think that's so important to take that advice, really, because I think a lot of people nowadays, and people of my generation that I speak to, I think they lack the confidence, and it's probably because of their age as well. But you learn this thing as you get older. But
you mentioned about the internet, and I think there's a bit of I can learn everything from the internet scenario now.
I don't need anyone's help.
And I think you really, if I could give you one bit of advice, it's to get out there and meet as many companies as you can. Yeah. Experience them firsthand. Don't rely on seeing it on a video or whatever. Don't rely on seeing it on the net. Go and see them. Tread their boards. Yeah. Live a day in their shoes and see what they get up to, and to experience it fully, to understand their problems, issues, and whatever. Yeah. That will always pay dividends, I think. And you'll never have enough time to get around all the ones you'd love to go and see. I know that for myself, really. Although I've visited probably 2,000 or 3,000 companies in my life at the end of the day, and learned something from a lot of them. Some of them are still there, some of them aren't. But there's always something you take away at the end of that day that can be of use to someone. And I know somebody says to me, I've got this issue now, I'll still remember companies from 10 years ago. So, try these guys are still there. Just
because it interested you at the time, didn't it? So
and I'm still interested. If I could spend every day visiting another company, I would. Yeah. Just to learn something that I don't know. Learn how it's made. I love these new programs on the telly, how it's made. Fantastic.
It's amazing, isn't it?
When they show you
about one particular thing.
Absolutely. If I don't understand the technology, it bugs me something terrible. Yeah. If I don't understand how it's made, if I don't understand how it works, as an engineer, you have to take it apart, you have to reverse engineer it, you have to understand what makes it tick. How does that work, for God's sake? If you don't know that, it's always something in the back of your head that you need to try and discover something.
Did you watch the Beatles documentary?
No.
I mean, the thing that is great, but the thing that was so amazing.
I've got it on video actually. My daughter's bought me on DVD, and I haven't watched it. Yeah,
you really should watch it. Because the thing that's amazing about that is that basically, I don't know if you know, but they used a load of AI stuff to basically rejuvenate and remaster all the audio.
Did they?
And now what they're doing is they're taking old Beatles tracks and they're just setting the computer on it.
Yeah.
Comes back with Ringo's drum part on his own.
Yeah.
And
Paul
on the bass.
That's amazing. It's how they can separate that out. But then again,
so
you go into the recording studio. That every track was laid down separately.
Yeah.
In a recording studio. So we were in a 64-track recording studio in Abbey Road.
Yeah.
And every bit was laid down separately, and then you'd record it together, and then they could break it down. It was even that old tech like that was amazing.
Yeah.
Really.
It's like reverse engineering.
Yeah, eight track tapes that we'd have, the master tapes, etc. There'd be 8 tracks on, so you could actually break it down. I've still got the master tapes at home of
bring each thing in. And,
it's amazing. I've still got some of the vinyl and some of the stuff that we made as well.
I've been playing with it because I make a bit of music as well, and I've been playing with it with my own songs. So I'll master my songs down into one file, and then, to be honest, I'm not very precious about the mixes or anything. I like to just save it and then it's done. And sometimes I'll throw it into that software. And then almost like remix it.
Back in the day when we did this, I'm talking about early 1989 to 92 was when I ran the record company. Triple R Records was the name. My company's Triple R Promotions, so it was Triple R Records. And we had two main acts, Boasty and Will Kofi. Will Kofi did a remake of House of the Rising Sun, and Boasty did a 4-track EP. At the time, you had to have, for each one of the artists, 500 CDs and 500 EPs made.
Right,
Absolute fortune to make that. And you have to send them out here, there and everywhere. And we'd have, at the time, again, because the internet didn't really exist properly then, you'd have a book, the Gig Guide to the UK, and it'd list every venue that would hire, bands in. And my job was to contact each one of those venues to try and get my unknown bands gigs.
Hard work.
And we, eventually, if you managed to get showcases down in London to visit the A&R men around the major record companies to try and sell them on.
The power of music, though, isn't it? Because the amount of people that want to be involved in music and are so passionate about it. But it's just so saturated nowadays.
You still play vinyl?
Yeah, I've got a load of vinyl. Okay. But
I'll bring you one of ours along, and you can have a listen. When I bring the book along for you, I'll bring you one of our EPs along, one of the 4-track EPs, and you have to let me know what you think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I know that one of my songs, one of the songs I wrote, called "Long History of Love," was we've sold the track to King. I don't know if you've heard of them, blues band. They perform in Lincoln quite over a few years, but they're Manhattan Records.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, it's one of their prime acts.
Yeah,
and they bought Long History of Love and they recorded that, and it became Blues Song of the Year.
Wow!
So I was quite proud of that. Yeah, I was quite proud of that.
How long did you record it? How long have you written it before they took it on?
I wrote it in 88, I think. And they, when the band was, I sold them to Sony. I sold the band and everything and the recording stuff to Sony. They never made it. They didn't make it. They tried, but they just without, because I decided then not to manage them anymore. I got fed up with drugs and that pervades the music industry, and the young A&R men at 16 years old who frisbeed by CD across the desk saying that's shite. I just got fed up with that really. There wasn't any real. Here I was working with the DTI, meeting with really influential people, and then I got the 16-year-old kid frisbeeing a disc across the desk, and thinking,
it's a different world.
It's exactly right. But going into Abbey Road was great.
Yeah.
Going into the same piano room as Paul McCartney,
Yeah.
When they did the White Album, sitting at that piano and meeting the people that do it. We didn't record there. We did the remix there. So we used a studio called Fairview Studios in Hull. And then a company called SRT that did the master pressings. Sorry, they did the pressing for production, but we recorded the master pressing at Abbey Road, the final mix, and it was great just to be there. We did the usual stuff, walking on the crossing and being in the reception with Abbey Road above the door. So you had to do all that sort of crap. It was part of the game, really.
What was your favourite? Who was your favourite artist?
I think the Beatles primarily. I mean, I used to do Lennon McCartney songs when I did covers. I did those, and I did Gary Moore songs, and a few other things like that. Steppenwolf.
I don't think you can really beat the Beatles, can you? I don't think it's still
nobody has come close in terms of their writing ability,
Variety.
Absolutely, no. Back in the day, I liked Free. Free were one of my favourites. All Right Now is still a track that I would sing if I started to gig it ever again.
Yeah. It all comes back to the Beatles.
I go back to them every time. In fact, if I went back to my house and I could pull your 4 mop top wigs out and a Paul McCartney bass guitar that we used to just do a Beatles act, a tribute act basically. Not as good as the bootleg Beatles, but we did do a tribute act and it was quite good. We enjoyed it.
That's good fun, though,
I think I could just about still do all the lyrics for most of the Beatles songs, I think.
Yeah, it's in there.
You can't get it out once it's in.
How long have we been going now? An hour and 6, it's not too bad.
Any other questions that you've got?
Let's have a look. Let's see what else there is.
Quite enjoy it. That's good. Quite enjoy it. Just to share some information.
I mean, that's kind of why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Just to kind of enjoy it because I thought.
While you're searching, we a part of our promotions activity, some of our charity fundraising, we still have one world record between John O'Groats to Land's End on a moped.
Really?
Yeah, 27 hours, 11 minutes and 6 seconds.
It's a 50cc one?
Yeah, on a 50cc. The first year we did it was on a DT, because I'm a Yamaha man.
Yeah.
A 50cc DT Yamaha, and we did that. So it's the record between John O'Groats and Land's End on the machine, not one rider. Yeah. So it's the quickest time on a small capacity machine. It's a thing called the Alex Rintoul Trophy. It's owned by the John O'Groats to Land's End Association, and the Guinness people then sort of sponsor that afterwards. So we did it on a DT. It took us 36 hours, made a lot of mistakes, but also we did it and collected for charity. At every roadside little chef on the way down, we'd stop, stand on a table, sing a song and collect money in a bucket and put it in the back of the van. So that kind of slowed us down a little bit. Yeah. But then we went the next year just as quick as we could. And we did it in 27 hours, 11 minutes and 6 seconds. That's our record, really. So
no one's beat you yet?
No, funnily enough, nobody's challenged for it. I don't know why.
It's a bit too specific. Someone will probably try and do it with
the
another.
John O'Groats to Land's End Association still exists. In fact, they've got the Triple R trophy down there for anybody that wants to try and beat it. We gave them a trophy and said, there you go. As well as, because we won the Alex Rintoul trophy 2 years on the trot because nobody else was going for anything. And that's for any bike under 125cc. Between end to end, so we were rewarded it 2 years ago. We thought, well, that's enough, we've done our bit now, let's let somebody else have a go. So we bought your trophy, give that out for anybody that can do it on 50cc, not 125, because that's your trophy, it's 50cc.
Is it kind of like is there a particular route you have to go on then?
You have to pick your own route, really. You can't go on motorways as a simple answer, you've just got to do A's and B roads. So 879 miles I think it was in total on A roads. And they were absolutely fantastic. The people at both ends that flagged us off and flagged us in at the other end, they put us up for free. We had all the diesel donated, we had the van donated, and I think we raised about just under £19,000, I think, from that one.
I want to do that now, you've said that.
It's just...
It sounds so fun. I don't want to try and beat your record.
Yeah, by all means, people have done it on monkey bikes and things like that, with about 20 of them do it, and did it, but they took about 4 days to do it, I think, really, because they kept getting drunk on it.
Had to stop.
It was just a crack, it was just, but we did it, there were, I think, 6 of us the first year and 7 of us the next year, and we had great fun doing it, but just literally, because I got friends that, a part of the Triple R promotions thing was I used to run a thing called Lincoln Strongest Man as well, so... And the winner of Lincoln Strongest Man would go and compete in the Braemar Highland Games.
Wow.
So when we went up to compete, we had a guest house that we stayed in, some great friends of mine who run a guest house, and they put us up for free for the 4 days we were up doing the Highland Games. So in front of 20,000 people, we go up and make idiots of ourselves trying to toss the cable and throw a weight. And I mean, we didn't know how to do it very well. No. We were trained a little bit by Jeff Capes. Yeah. He showed us how to do little bits, because he thought we were completely nuts with a week's training to go up and compete in the Royal Highland Games. But he said, I admire you, but you're bloody mad. He said, this is my games, I've won it so many times over. Yeah. Good luck. So he gave us a bit of training, we went up and we tried it. It was just a great bit of fun.
Good fun with lads.
Yeah. A bit of fun with some big guys, that were really strong and whatever. So, and that was great. So we learned from that we could stage a trip up to John O'Groats. And Dave, the guy that owned the guest house, was a biker as well. So he came with us on the trip then. So we stayed at drove up to his place at the Spittal of Glenshee, then drove up next morning at like 4 o'clock in the morning to get to John O'Groats and set off at 10 o'clock. That was all downhill.
That's easy.
Nice. And then the team that we got, all of them basically bike riders, etc. Then we'd do it in like 2 hour stints. I was managing it, so I only had 2 stints throughout the whole thing, but it was just great fun. And it was, if we managed to leave one rider behind at the services at one point, because everybody was snoozing in the van, because we'd driven up there, tried to have a night's sleep in the guest house, but everybody was so fired up and whatever, and wanted to talk about it. So by the time they'd sort of set off from John O'Groats and got about 20 miles in, everybody was asleep. But we filmed a lot of it on the way down and collected some monies on the way down. And it was absolutely brilliant. But that was on an RD. We changed from a DT to an RD50, so we got another couple of miles an hour faster.
Yeah.
But it was great.
That sounds really fun.
It was a great crack, yeah. Really
Might go and get my CBT again now. I think it runs out, doesn't it?
Does it? I don't know. I've had my bike licence since '74. So I don't know.
I think I haven't even got a bike licence. It's ridiculous. I had a CBT and I used to ride to school on mopeds, but I think it'd be nice to get it.
A colleague of mine who I worked with at Rustons back in the 70s, we hadn't seen each other for 30 years and we met up very recently. He said exactly the same. See, I know I used to ride around when you did, Ray, and when you had your 650 Yum, I had that old 250 Honda and never took my test. So I'm doing my CBT now. So I'm doing it now. What bike do you recommend to do it?
I think you just suddenly realise, don't you?
Yeah. So the route to getting a licence now is a lot more complicated than it was in my day. Twice around the test centre and an emergency stop when you're on your licence.
Yeah, you're all right. Off you go.
That was it, really. That was it. You'd be let loose on 1,060 Kawasaki after that, really.
Yeah, that's it.
If you could afford one, that was. But there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, mate.
It's really nice.
Thanks. No, I appreciate that. It was really good fun, actually.
I'd like to do it again at some point. I'm sure.
I'm going to leave you these if that's all right.